The planet Zorath was a world of ethereal beauty, its skies painted in hues of violet and indigo, its forests made of towering crystalline trees that shimmered like diamonds under the light of its twin suns. The Zorathians, a peaceful and graceful race, lived in harmony with their environment. Their luminous blue skin and delicate wing-like appendages made them appear almost angelic, but their lives were far from perfect. The shadow of the Virin, a ruthless alien race, loomed over them, threatening their fragile peace. Among the Zorathians was Kayla, a young widow who had lost her mate, Tevin, in a skirmish with the Virin. Since then, she had been raising her two children, Nira and Tavin, on her own. Life was hard, but Kayla was determined to provide for her family. She spent her days foraging in the crystalline forests and crafting delicate jewelry from the shards of the trees, which she traded in the village market. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, a loud explosion echoed through the sky. Kayla looked up to see a streak of fire cutting through the violet heavens. A spaceship, unlike anything she had ever seen, was crashing into the forest near her village. The Zorathians gathered in fear, whispering among themselves. Some believed it was another Virin attack, while others thought it might be a sign from the stars. Kayla, driven by curiosity and a sense of duty, ventured into the forest to investigate. She found the ship partially buried in the ground, its metal hull scorched and smoking. Inside, she discovered a human man, unconscious and bleeding. His rugged features and strange clothing marked him as an outsider, but there was something about him that intrigued her. Against the warnings of her fellow villagers, Kayla decided to bring him back to her home. The man, Jerk, was an engineer from Earth, part of a small exploration team that had been mapping uncharted regions of the galaxy. He had been separated from his crew during a skirmish with the Virin and had crash-landed on Zorath. When he awoke, he was disoriented and wary, but Kayla's gentle demeanor put him at ease. As Kayla tended to Jerk's wounds, the two began to talk. Jerk was fascinated by Kayla's world and her people, while Kayla was intrigued by Jerk's stories of Earth and the vastness of the universe. They shared moments of quiet connection, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. However, their newfound peace was short-lived. The Virin, having tracked Jerk's ship, arrived on Zorath with a small scouting party. They began to terrorize the village, demanding that the Zorathians hand over the human. Kayla and Jerk knew they had to act quickly to protect the village and its people. Jerk, using his engineering skills, helped the Zorathians fortify their defenses. He taught them how to create traps and barricades, while Kayla used her knowledge of the land to guide them. Together, they prepared for the inevitable battle. When the Virin attacked, the village was ready. Kayla and Jerk fought side by side, their combined strength and determination inspiring the Zorathians to stand their ground. The battle was fierce, but in the end, the Virin were driven back. As the dust settled, Kayla and Jerk stood together, their hearts pounding with adrenaline and relief. They had won the battle, but they knew the war was far from over. The Virin would return, and they would need to be ready. For now, though, they allowed themselves a moment of peace. Kayla looked at Jerk, her luminous eyes filled with gratitude and something more, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Jerk, in turn, felt a deep connection to Kayla, a bond that went beyond words. As the twin suns rose over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the crystalline forests, Kayla and Jerk knew that their lives had changed forever. They had found something unexpected in each other, a love that transcended worlds. The battle for survival. The victory over the Virin scouting party was short-lived. Though the Zorathians had managed to drive the invaders away, the village was left battered and bruised. Homes were damaged, supplies were running low, and the people were exhausted. Kayla and Jerk knew that the Virin would return, and when they did, the attack would be far more devastating. Kayla stood at the edge of the village, her luminous blue skin glowing faintly under the violet sky. Her wing-like appendages twitched nervously as she scanned the horizon. Jerk approached her, his boots crunching softly on the crystalline ground. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and she turned to face him. His rugged features were etched with concern, but there was a determination in his stormy gray eyes that gave her hope. "We need to prepare," Jerk said, his voice steady. "The Virin won't give up easily. They'll come back with more ships, more soldiers. We need to be ready." Kayla nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. But how? We're not warriors, Jerk. We're a peaceful people. We don't have the weapons or the strength to fight them. Jerk's lips curved into a faint smile. You don't need to be warriors, you just need to be smart, and you have something the Virin don't, this land. You know it better than anyone. We can use that to our advantage. Together, Kayla and Jerk began to devise a plan. They gathered the villagers and explained the situation. At first, there was fear and resistance. Many of the Zorathians had never fought before, and the idea of facing the Virin again was terrifying. But Kayla's calm presence and Jerk's confidence inspired them. Slowly, they began to come together, united by a common goal, to protect their home. Jerk taught the villagers how to create traps using the natural resources of the forest. They dug pits and lined them with sharpened crystal shards, camouflaged the entrances with leaves and vines, and set up tripwires that would trigger alarms. Kayla, meanwhile, led groups of villagers to gather supplies, food, water, and medicinal herbs, and stored them in hidden caches throughout the forest. As the days passed, the village transformed into a fortress. The once peaceful streets were now lined with barricades, and the villagers trained tirelessly under Jerk's guidance. Kayla watched with pride as her people grew stronger and more confident. Even her children, Nira and Tavan, helped in their own way, carrying messages and gathering supplies. But amidst the preparations, Kayla and Jerk found moments of quiet connection. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, they sat together on a rocky outcrop overlooking the village. The air was warm, and the faint hum of the crystalline trees filled the silence. "You've done so much for us," Kayla said softly, her voice tinged with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you." Jerk shook his head. "You don't need to thank me, I'm just doing what's right. Besides," he added with a smirk, "I think I've grown fond of this place and its people." Kayla's heart fluttered at his words. She looked at him, her luminous eyes searching his. "Do you ever think about what will happen after this, if we survive?" Jerk's expression softened. "I try not to think too far ahead, but if we make it through this, I'd like to stay, if you'll have me." Kayla smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "I'd like that." Their moment was interrupted by the sound of alarms echoing through the village. The Virin had returned. The attack was swift and brutal. The Virin descended upon the village with a force far greater than before. Their ships darkened the sky, and their soldiers stormed the streets, weapons blazing. But the Zorathians were ready. Kayla and Jerk fought side by side, their bond giving them strength. Jerk used his engineering skills to disable Virin weapons and vehicles, while Kayla led groups of villagers in guerrilla-style attacks, using the forest to their advantage. The traps they had set worked perfectly, catching the Virin off guard and slowing their advance. But the battle was far from easy. The Virin were relentless and the Zorathians were outnumbered. Kayla watched in horror as her friends and neighbors fell, their luminous bodies crumpling to the ground. Her heart ached with every loss, but she couldn't afford to falter. She had to keep fighting for her children, for her people, and for Jerk. As the battle raged on, Jerk was struck by a Virin blast. He fell to the ground, his body convulsing with pain. Kayla rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding. "Jerk, stay with me," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "You can't leave me, not now." Jerk's eyes fluttered open and he managed a weak smile. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. "We're in this together, remember." With renewed determination, Kayla helped Jerk to his feet. Together, they rallied the villagers for one final push. Using the last of their strength, they managed to drive the Virin back, forcing them to retreat into the forest. As the dust settled, the village was in ruins, but the Zorathians had survived. Kayla and Jerk stood together, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. They had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. But they knew the fight wasn't over. The Virin would return, and they would need to be stronger than ever. For now, though, they allowed themselves a moment of peace. Kayla looked at Jerk, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. "We did it," she said softly. Jerk nodded, his eyes filled with admiration. "We did, and we'll keep fighting together." As the twin suns rose over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the crystalline forests, Kayla and Jerk knew that their bond had been forged in fire. They were no longer just two individuals from different worlds. They were a team, united by love and a shared purpose. A new beginning. The aftermath of the battle left the village in a state of both relief and despair. The Virin had been driven back, but the cost had been high. Homes were reduced to rubble, the crystalline forests bore scars from the fighting, and the once vibrant streets were now eerily quiet. The Zorathians moved through the ruins with heavy hearts, their luminous blue skin dulled by grief and exhaustion. Kayla stood at the center of the village, her children, Nira and Taven, clinging to her sides. Her wing-like appendages drooped, and her eyes, usually so full of light, were shadowed with sorrow. She had lost friends, neighbors, and a part of herself in the battle, but as she looked around at the devastation, she felt a spark of determination ignite within her. They had survived, and that meant there was still hope. Jerk, though injured, refused to rest. He moved through the village with a limp, his rugged features set in a mask of resolve. He helped clear debris, tended to the wounded, and worked tirelessly to reinforce the village's defenses. His presence was a source of strength for the Zorathians, and they looked to him with a mixture of gratitude and awe. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Kayla found Jerk sitting by the edge of the forest, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. She approached him quietly, her footsteps barely making a sound on the crystalline ground. "You should be resting," she said softly, sitting beside him. Jerk glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I could say the same to you." Kayla sighed, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her responsibilities. "There's so much to do. The village needs us. My people need me." "And you need to take care of yourself," Jerk replied, his voice gentle but firm. "You can't help anyone if you're running on empty." Kayla looked at him, her luminous eyes searching his. "How do you do it? How do you keep going, even when everything feels hopeless?" Jerk was silent for a moment, his gaze returning to the mountains. "I think about what's at stake," he said finally. "The people I care about, the future we're fighting for, that's what keeps me going." Kayla felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She reached out and placed a hand on his, her touch light but reassuring. "Thank you, Jerk, for everything." Jerk turned to her, his stormy gray eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "I told you before, Kayla, we're in this together." As the days passed, the village began to rebuild. Kayla and Jerk worked side by side, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. They cleared the rubble, repaired the homes, and planted new crops. Jerk introduced the Zorathians to new technologies, helping them create stronger buildings and more efficient tools. Kayla, meanwhile, focused on healing her people, both physically and emotionally. She organized gatherings where the villagers could share their stories and support one another, fostering a sense of unity and resilience. But amidst the rebuilding, there were moments of quiet intimacy between Kayla and Jerk. One night, as they sat by a small fire outside Kayla's home, Jerk reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved crystal. "I found this in the forest," he said, holding it out to her. "It reminded me of you." Kayla took the crystal, her fingers brushing against his. The light from the fire reflected off its surface, casting shimmering patterns on her skin. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jerk's gaze was soft, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not as beautiful as you." Kayla's heart fluttered at his words, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. She looked at him, her luminous eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and affection. "Jerk, I—" Before she could finish, Jerk leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle but filled with emotion, a silent promise of the bond they had forged. When they pulled apart, Kayla felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. But their happiness was short-lived. One morning, as the village buzzed with activity, a loud rumble echoed through the sky. Kayla and Jerk looked up to see a massive Virin ship descending toward the village. "They're back," Jerk said, his voice grim. Kayla's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "We need to evacuate the village, get everyone to the forest." Jerk nodded, his expression determined. "I'll hold them off as long as I can." Kayla grabbed his arm, her grip firm. "No, we do this together." Jerk hesitated, then nodded. Together. The air on Zorath was thick with tension, the kind that made every breath feel heavy and every moment stretch into an eternity. The Virin had returned, as Kayla and Jerk had feared, but this time their forces were overwhelming. The sky was a sea of dark ships, blotting out the twin suns and casting the village into an eerie twilight. The ground trembled under the weight of their machines, and the once vibrant crystalline forest seemed to shudder in anticipation of the coming storm. Kayla stood at the edge of the village, her luminous blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her wing-like appendages twitched nervously as she clutched a makeshift weapon in her hands. Beside her, Jerk adjusted the straps on his armor, his stormy gray eyes scanning the horizon. His face was set in a grim expression, but there was a fire in his gaze that refused to be extinguished. "This is it," Jerk said, his voice low and steady. "We hold the line here or we lose everything." Kayla nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced over her shoulder at the villagers who stood behind them, their luminous eyes filled with fear but also determination. They had come too far to give up now. "We fight for our home," Kayla said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "For our children, for each other. No matter what happens today, we will not let the Virin take what is ours." A cheer rose from the villagers, their voices echoing through the crystalline trees. Kayla turned back to Jerk, her expression softening. "Stay close to me," she said quietly. "I can't lose you." Jerk reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "You won't. We're in this together, remember." The first wave of Virin soldiers descended upon the village like a tidal wave, their weapons blazing and their cries filling the air. Kayla and Jerk met them head-on, their movements synchronized as if they had been fighting together for a lifetime. Kayla's agility and knowledge of the land allowed her to outmaneuver the enemy, while Jerk's strength and resourcefulness made him a force to be reckoned with. The battle was chaos. The traps they had set worked perfectly, catching the Virin off guard and slowing their advance, but the enemy was relentless. Kayla watched as her friends and neighbors fell, their luminous bodies crumpling to the ground. Her heart ached with every loss, but she couldn't afford to falter. She had to keep fighting for her children, for her people, and for Jerk. As the battle raged on, Kayla found herself separated from Jerk. She fought her way through the chaos, her weapon flashing in the dim light as she took down Virin's soldiers one after another. But the enemy was too many, and she was growing tired. Just as she thought she couldn't go on, a familiar voice called out to her, "Kayla." She turned to see Jerk fighting his way toward her, his armor battered and his face streaked with dirt and blood. He reached her side just as a group of Virin soldiers closed in around them. "We need to fall back," Jerk said, his voice urgent. "We can't hold them here." Kayla shook her head, her luminous eyes blazing with determination. "No, we hold the line. If we fall back now, they'll overrun the village." Jerk hesitated, then nodded. "Then we fight." Together, they faced the Virin soldiers, their combined strength and determination inspiring the villagers to stand their ground. The battle was fierce, but Kayla and Jerk fought with everything they had, their bond giving them the strength to keep going. As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in an eerie glow, the tide began to turn. The Virin, realizing they were losing ground, began to retreat. The villagers cheered as the enemy fled, their voices echoing through the crystalline trees. Kayla and Jerk stood together, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. They had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. But the cost had been high. The village was in ruins and many lives had been lost. Kayla looked around at the devastation, her heart heavy with grief. "We did it," Jerk said softly, his voice filled with awe. "We actually did it." Kayla turned to him, her luminous eyes filled with tears. "We did, but at what cost?" Jerk reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll rebuild together, and we'll make sure this never happens again." Kayla nodded, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. Together. As the twin suns rose over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the crystalline forests, Kayla and Jerk knew that their bond had been forged in fire. They were no longer just two individuals from different worlds. They were a team, united by love and a shared purpose. The aftermath of the battle left the village in a state of quiet reflection. The Virin had been driven back, their forces scattered and their threat neutralized, for now. The Zorathians moved through the ruins with a mix of sorrow and relief, their luminous blue skin glowing faintly under the violet sky. The crystalline forests, though scarred, still shimmered with a quiet resilience, a reminder that life could endure even in the face of destruction. Kayla stood at the edge of the village, her wing-like appendages twitching as she surveyed the damage. Her children, Nira and Tavan, clung to her sides, their luminous eyes wide with both fear and awe. She placed a reassuring hand on each of their heads, her heart swelling with love and determination. They had survived, and that meant there was still hope. Jerk approached her, his rugged features softened by the faint light of the twin suns. His armor was battered, and his movements were slow with exhaustion, but his stormy gray eyes still burned with determination. He placed a hand on Kayla's shoulder, his touch grounding her. "We did it," he said softly, his voice filled with quiet pride. "They're gone." Kayla turned to him, her luminous eyes searching his. "For now, but what if they come back? What if they're stronger next time?" Jerk's expression hardened, but his voice remained gentle. "Then we'll be ready, we'll rebuild, we'll make this place stronger than ever, and we'll do it together." Kayla felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Together," she echoed. As the days passed, the village began to heal. Kayla and Jerk worked side by side, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. They cleared the rubble, repaired the homes, and planted new crops. Jerk introduced the Zorathians to new technologies, helping them create stronger buildings and more efficient tools. Kayla, meanwhile, focused on healing her people, both physically and emotionally. She organized gatherings where the villagers could share their stories and support one another, fostering a sense of unity and resilience. But amidst the rebuilding, there were moments of quiet intimacy between Kayla and Jerk. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, they sat together on a rocky outcrop overlooking the village. The air was warm, and the faint hum of the crystalline trees filled the silence. Jerk reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved crystal. He held it out to Kayla, his expression soft. "I found this in the forest," he said. "It reminded me of you." Kayla took the crystal, her fingers brushing against his. The light from the fire reflected off its surface, casting shimmering patterns on her skin. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jerk's gaze was soft, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not as beautiful as you." Kayla's heart fluttered at his words, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. She looked at him, her luminous eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and affection. "Jerk, I—" Before she could finish, Jerk leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle but filled with emotion, a silent promise of the bond they had forged. When they pulled apart, Kayla felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. But their happiness was not without challenges. The Virin's defeat had left a power vacuum in the region, and other alien races began to take notice of Zorath. Rumors of the planet's resilience and resources spread, and soon, new threats emerged. One evening, as Kayla and Jerk sat by the fire, a messenger arrived with urgent news. A neighboring alien race, the Krill, had expressed interest in forming an alliance with the Zorathians. They offered protection and resources in exchange for access to Zorath's crystalline forests. Kayla and Jerk knew they had to tread carefully. The Krill were powerful, but their motives were unclear. They called a meeting with the village elders to discuss the offer. "We can't trust them," one elder said, his voice filled with suspicion. "They'll take what they want and leave us with nothing." "But we can't face these threats alone," another argued. "We need allies." Kayla listened quietly, her mind racing. She turned to Jerk, her luminous eyes filled with uncertainty. "What do you think?" Jerk hesitated, then spoke. "We need to be cautious, but we also can't isolate ourselves. Maybe we can negotiate terms that protect our people and our land." Kayla nodded, her heart swelling with pride at his wisdom. "Then that's what we'll do." As the meeting continued, Kayla and Jerk worked together to craft a proposal that would protect Zorath's interests while fostering a new alliance. It was a delicate balance, but they were determined to find a way forward. In the weeks that followed, Kayla and Jerk met with the Krill representatives. The negotiations were tense, but Kayla's calm presence and Jerk's resourcefulness helped them navigate the challenges. In the end, they reached an agreement that would benefit both races. As the Krill ships departed, Kayla and Jerk stood together, their hearts filled with hope. They had faced the impossible and emerged stronger than ever. Kayla looked at Jerk, her luminous eyes filled with love and gratitude. "We did it," she said softly. Jerk nodded, his eyes filled with admiration. "We did, and we'll keep fighting together." As the twin suns rose over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the crystalline forests, Kayla and Jerk knew that their bond had been forged in fire. They were no longer just two individuals from different worlds. They were a team, united by love and a shared purpose. And as they looked out over the village, now bustling with life and hope, they knew that their story was just beginning. New ending, a future forged in unity. Years passed, and Zorath flourished under Kayla and Jerk's leadership. The village grew into a thriving city, its crystalline forests protected and its people united. The alliance with the Krill brought new opportunities, and the Zorathians became known throughout the galaxy for their resilience and ingenuity. Kayla and Jerk's love only deepened with time. They raised Nira and Tavan together, teaching them the values of courage, compassion, and unity. The children grew into strong, wise leaders, ready to carry on their parents' legacy. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Kayla and Jerk stood together on the same rocky outcrop where they had shared their first kiss. The village, now a city, spread out before them, its lights twinkling like stars. "We've come so far," Kayla said softly, her luminous eyes filled with pride. Jerk wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "And we'll keep going together." Kayla smiled, her heart swelling with love. Together. As the twin suns set, casting a golden glow over the crystalline forests, Kayla and Jerk knew that their love had not only saved their world, but had also created a future filled with endless possibilities. And in that moment, they knew that their story was just the beginning of a new chapter, one written in the stars.